Hey, brother.
Let's give like 5 minutes for everyone to join in case they are planning to. I think I put the agenda meanwhile in case someone wants to take an early look and provide feedback. Please feel free to do so.
Hey,
Hello.
Lawrence, are you gonna make the trip next week? Come and join the Iceberg Summit.
I mean, I'm local, so like.
You are local, okay. Sorry, I think that's the second time I've confused that. I think last time we saw each other in person, and where was it? San Francisco. I made the same mistake.
But JB is coming from France, so like.
Who's coming?
JB.
Oh, JB. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So are you in the San Francisco like area, or are you South Bay? Where are you?
I'm South Bay.
Okay.
Like, I live in Mountain View, so.
Okay.
Oops.
Awesome.
Song.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey, son.
Just wait for one more minute.
Sung, are you going to be hosting that pre-summit meeting at the offices up there in San Francisco again this year?
Yes, we actually have a better location as well.
Oh, really?
It's near the Iceberg Summit location, just like 2 minutes down the block.
Wow.
But you do need to register, so if you haven't yet, please do.
Yeah, I won't be able to make it, but last year's location was not a bad location. You're like right on the pier.
Yeah, it was nice. Just a little less convenient to get to. And I hear the actual room that the event is being hosted in is actually one of the nicest and most coveted rooms within Bloomberg.
Oh, wow.
So hopefully it'll be a good turnout and a good event.
Awesome. I think it's 9:05. I think we can start. I just want to brief about like what we discussed last time, and we can start from there. So last time, we presented the doc that me and Ryan have been working on, essentially on the predefined mask. What were our researches? What are the engines that are used it, and what do we think the definition would be? Um, there was an action item on what to do when you have a last 4 characters mask and they are less than 4 characters. So that was in one action item, and we wanted to investigate about what is the ranger behavior in that cases. And there is Oracle also supports it. So what's Oracle behavior on that? I'm not sure if Talat is here. So that was another thing that Talat would look into. Like there are some overlapping masks in this from BigQuery as well. So Talat said that he would be looking into why BigQuery has this kind of a behavior for these kind of masks. So I think he's not. So that's where we discussed, and there were 2 masks that was left. One was the query local hash, and the another was the global one. That is yet to be discussed full thoroughly. So that was brief about what we discussed. Cool. I would like to resume from the last 4 characters mask where the characters is less than n. I did some deep dive, and I wanted to show the sharing here and propose about like what we were thinking about already as a behavior and why that behavior is something that we should go with. Okay. Let me share my entire screen. Okay. Okay. Yeah, before, so just a full disclaimer, I used Claude, but I just like left it to double verify every link and things he does, and double verified it myself as well. I think that I learned from Russell that you need to give as a prompt, so to save from hallucination. Okay. So here is like behaviors of Hive, Ranger with Hive, Ranger with Trino, Ranger just Java plugin, and other things. Uh, what comes out most is that if you have a character, if you want to apply a mask of last n, and if you have less than n characters, they are generally no op. Essentially, don't mask it at all. In that case, it falls back into the argument that you have a smarter admin who knows what kind of mask that should be applied for that particular column, and a dumber mask who just knows who does not knows, like, does not handle special case that okay, I pad some things and everything to make it more secure. So this is Apache Hive for you. So essentially the last n delegates to the UDF of Hive that's giving you a last n mask. And if you see there is a condition here which says that okay, if less than n, then you should just return the value. And in Ranger, it's very interesting. I've not seen this code really very deeply before. They have a very well-defined JSON. And in that JSON, they have like the strings or the regex expressions they want to attach as part of the query, like engine predicates. So let me find the mask last n.
I think it's right there. Mask last 4.
Oh, last. I think yes. But this is a transformer. I think there is a one place where it has regex. Give me a second, please. I think it is just delegating to the mask last n of Hive predicates. I think this is just like Ranger is delegating to the mask last n of the UDF that we already talked about. So this is the same one. I think in the Trino one, it will become more clear. The regex last n. Yes. Yes. So this is the Trino one. Again, it's a regex replace for 4 and 2 and everything. Similarly, the behavior for Ranger Java, I realized that there is you can have a dedicated Java plugin for this as well. And it's the same predicate that if length is less than 4, then you return the value. Otherwise, you do string utils repeat and everything of the value. Just essentially like redact everything with XXX, and then you just give the value that you want. BigQuery we've already discussed. SQL Server is interesting that it pads things to not make it visible that much. In Oracle, they say that, okay, this is an undefined behavior. It's not recommended to have such kind of a scenario, and you should use regex replace instead to have this kind of overall structure. I see a hand up, or I heard that there is a hand up. There's no one. Okay. So where overall the case that I'm trying to make is that, okay, if value is less than equals to 3, then just not pad it, or just don't do anything specific, or just don't do the SHA-256. Just let it show the value as it is. And in that particular case, it's not insecure. It's just the admin who has just chosen the wrong mask for this particular data in the call. Do you all have any objections to that?
I support that. I think simpler is better, and the hash is violating expectations because you're actually not showing the value. And depending on whether it's a consistent hash or a query hash, you can reverse it. So like,
exactly,
it doesn't make sense to me that you would like just show a completely random value in like a query hash. And if you are using a global hash, it would be something you can reverse with a lookup table quite easily. So like, yeah, just show the last 4 characters. That makes sense to me. One interesting thing I think you said is that it is padded in some cases. So you could do like, XXXX high. I don't think we would need to do that.
I am also on the supporter. Like it's like adding more complexity to the mask itself rather than just letting it do what we do. At least from the implementation point of view, it keeps it simple. So
yeah,
my argument is also the same thing. That let's keep the implementation simple, and from the service implementation part of it, it seems very easy to implement if we just leave it as it is. Okay, I'll take it as no objection, and I'll keep the definition as it is that we had in the initial proposal. Okay.
It looks like Dan has something to say.
Yeah, I want clarification because like we went through a bunch of different options and I'm actually not entirely clear on which one we're saying that we would do.
We will not do anything if your string length is less than 4. If
Okay,
you
so
are
you
marked
show the value.
yeah. We'll not do SHA. We will not pad it with something else to make it more shiny. We'll just leave it as it is. In that case, our argument is that you told us to mask the everything except the last 4, and our mask is done. That is the argument for that.
I can agree with that. I was confused by the hashing one because like that one's quite odd to me.
Yes, I think this is the BigQuery functionality that actually stumped, and that is where Talat said that he will take a look into knowing why BigQuery does this. But yeah, we can park it until we hear from Talat on any strong cases against it. But so far, I think we have pretty much the alignment on this one. Okay. Now, I think one thing that we were thinking about is like SHA-250. So I think this puts a pin on the discussion of the last time on the mask with last n with the n less than number of characters less than n.
Can I ask a question on the masks, both alphanumeric mask and the mask less than n? Where did we come out with punctuation characters on those? Are we preserving punctuation or replacing it with X?
We are preserving punctuation so far. That was the thing. The feedback I got was that we need to elaborate more on what kind of qualifies as punctuation. Well,
actually, I think that set there is the complete set of punctuation, because I think we want to be there conscious of cases where it's common to do like, a social security number or a phone number.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we don't want a huge set of things that allow you to look and see stuff in values. So I would keep it very minimal, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to disagree. But I think, yeah, open paren, close paren, comma, dot, and dash, totally reasonable as punctuation.
Yeah, I'm also on the same boat. I think comma for numbers like 1 million or something of that sort. Dot, I don't know properly for use case, but I think dot is very okay to have, and hyphens again for those similar things. Square brackets, I don't know if we want square brackets as a separate one.
So I can't think of anything where you have a specific format that you want to like leave punctuation in that uses square brackets.
Yes.
I also think we should acknowledge the risk here, which is that, this has an email example. Interesting.
Yeah, that was actually, we should have an enumerated list of which characters, like we should be explicit about which characters we care about, because we don't have the @ symbol in the example, but we do have it in, or we don't have it in the list of characters, but we do have it in the example.
And we should also be aware of like what leaks from having these characters. So for instance, if, you know, comma and dot are there, you can pick up like the rough size of like numbers. Well, actually, you can pick up the rough size of numbers anyway because you have ends. So like that seems like a reasonable leak if we have ends as well as x's. On the other hand, this this masked email example does not make me very comfortable because you'll be able to pick out email addresses from text.
And it actually includes the domain, which I don't think would be the case in masking. And that's, are we saying that we're preserving domain?
No, so this says the mask value is x's ends at x.x.
Oh, okay, hold on, sorry.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so like, but I think the point is you can pick out like, hey, there was an email address in this value. Is that something that we want to do? Right? Like, I don't even know if we want ends, because should you be able to pick out that there were numeric characters? Like, what's the point?
Yeah, I think X's across the board. No, I don't think you should distinguish numbers from letters in any way.
But that's the behavior of other mask alphanumeric.
Yeah, but I think in most cases you're going to find that the column itself is going to be a more significant signal to what the contents are. Like, how often do you have like social security numbers, emails, and like a bunch of other things mixed in the same column? No, it's typically going to be that you already know what the content type is from the column name. You just can't see what it is, because it's not typically that you would create a table and you're trying to obstruct people from knowing what the column is. It's just the values that you care about. So you would have a column that's like addressee, and then you're redacting who the actual addressee is. You're not trying to hide the fact that the column contains certain information.
I think you may not want to allow targeting rows based on like, oh, I see that this text field has an email address in it, but I don't know.
That's an administrator thing. Like, I think in almost all cases of data sets, you know what the content of the row is. You're just not allowed to see it.
But I mean, if that's really what people want, we have SHA. I think like I agree with like Russell. Like some of them is like more like gadgety, or like, or like you already know the type, you know that's emails, and so you just want like to mask things out, but like not really like do other things. So at that point, that's basically the data admin responsibility to use the right masking functions based on what they're comfortable like to share or not share. I'm not sure like if it's worth like spending a lot of like splitting hair around like the
and that's
for. So
that's certainly been our position on like mask alphanumeric, right? If you choose mask and you don't have enough characters, that's on you. Russell, what was your comment in the doc?
Was it the cute comment?
I just said that this is cute. It's a bit higher up.
Yeah, I think he was saying that.
I still think this one is, I still think this is just cute and not actually useful. Like, what does it actually tell us? That you have a well-formatted phone number or well-formatted email? Like, you know the structure kind of the information there. But if we're serious here, you should have stopped anything that doesn't look correct from getting into your system in the first place. I think people are just kind of used to seeing this sort of thing, like when you're in a user interface and you're an end user and someone's like, is this your email? I'm going to give you the shape of it to make sure you can verify it. But like in that case, you're masking it after it gets to the user. Like the system pulls out the real value, then masks it, then exposes it to the end user. We don't need to mask it for the person doing the BI query on it. And if you do, then you need the whole thing gone. Like they don't need any information then. They just need replace with null, which I like.
So I think we have definitely drifted from redacting information to presentation.
Yeah.
Like this does nothing. You know, we're actually saying that we want to hide this information, but then we're also like trying to be cute and show you something that it like, oh, it looks like the shape of an email, but like that really shouldn't be our responsibility. That's a.
I agree, but my argument for it is that other systems do this, so clearly people ask for it.
But isn't that like a function of some systems directly creating the database in order to do the presentation? Like basically like let's say, oh, like let's put everything in the database as masking policies, and so like I know like in my UI things would be like, I wonder, because like we also this thing of like when like people were doing like using like stop procedures for the set type of things. So like basically like using the database system as like a full development platform.
So I would actually argue this falls into the category of the other kind of masking functions, more complicated. For our basic masking functions, we should steer towards just basic functionality. Redaction is just replace it with X's. No fanciness, no nothing. Like we can, because like we're already arguing about which characters should we include and not include. And like somebody's going to have an issue and say, well, like we don't want to disclose like how big the domain is versus like how big the TLD is, you know, like, so I would argue just like, let's not bother with this. Let's just make it a strict redaction.
I think it's totally fine to say like mask every single character with X.
So then one question is that
people say we want fancy stuff. Are we gonna make them do fancy stuff on their own?
UDF. Like
Okay.
that's what that is for. Is like like when it gets past like redaction and we're getting to display, like, hey, what do we want our users to be able to see? Let's push that to the more complicated UDF approach. Let's not worry about it.
Let's do it. I can live with that.
So are we talking about just mask the alphanumeric to X, right? Not the special characters or like hyphen or at or everything. If everything, then that's no different with just null, then why do we even need it?
Well, that's why I like the replace with null, because I feel like that's the real value here. You either know there's a value there or you know there's no value there. And that's something you can actually use in a query engine and actually do things with. Like if you have someone who hasn't put in their social security number and you want to know all those people, that's like a valid thing to be able to query. But just knowing that like it's all X's, I feel isn't super valuable, but
So I think mask to null or replace with null because of null valued Boolean logic in databases is weird. So but if we have a mask to default or something like that, right? Like I'm more comfortable with like mask to default or, you know, replace with default, replace with null. I think, yeah, anytime we can cut one of these, that's a good thing. I do expect people to ask for this, though.
I'm fine with people asking for it, but then you just have to get back to the point with like, oh, so you want this, so we will display it to you correctly, but we're not actually in charge of display. Like we just give you these weird patterns, and your engine can do something completely different with that information if it wants. So you probably should do it there, especially if you have like requirements. I don't know.
think it's reasonable to say the database should never expose this to this app, right? Rather than saying like, hey, you need to do your display stuff in the app. I think people will say, no, I want to be able to verify it looks like a phone number or looks like a, but I'm fine letting people ask for that and coming back to it.
Yeah, but if we do what is proposed right now, where we don't do special characters, somebody's going to come and ask for the full redaction one. And that's actually the lowest common denominator, is just full redaction.
I just know when we get into the other business, they're going to be like, well, I want the email filter where it blocks everything but the suffix after the @ Oh, but never mind. I want it to block everything except for the .com or whatever. I just want to know what that part is. And I feel like we'll get into all these weird things.
I agree. That is a very strong argument against having it.
I also think that these are length preserving in a sense, one way or the other. I mean, mask to default with a string value, unless we say that, okay, this default is not a fixed size length, which is what the default of the data type is, that's going to be an interesting case to do. If so length preserving redaction, do we want to have that also handled as part of mask to default, or do we still want to keep mask alphanumeric and have a length preserving redaction and just get rid of special characters and say that, okay, it's a length preserving redaction and everything will be, every Unicode character will be replaced by XXX or something of that sort? Like, what are your thoughts about length preserving redactions for string call?
I don't think people use length of these things.
Okay.
But I think mask alphanumeric seems to be pretty common masking policy, right?
I mean, from where it come, for what it's worth, yes, it is. I think almost all the places that I have seen has this one way or the other. But I think we're just ditching that as an argument that, okay, it's commonly used, but it might be a concern that, okay, this database does this. Maybe other one was inspired because the other one does it. So, but I'm just a little bit wanting to know if we want to have length preserving redaction. Let's not in the case of emails, but think about like other cases like I have something like SSN and I'm using full redaction. Do I want to have like 9 characters always for SSN?
So that's another one where like I don't understand why an end user who doesn't have access to the field would want to be able to know that. You know, like in the case of social security number, you should be validating that on the way in. Some person analyzing your data, going over it and being like, oh, this person has a 12-character social security number. Like, what are they going to do with that information?
Yeah, the last person to be validating anything should be the one who can't see any of it, right? So what are they going to do with it?
So I don't know. I'm a Debbie Downer on all of this. I'm just like, if you're redacting, you're redacting. The only thing that we want to like expose, if you're going to expose something, is whether it's set or not. I can see the value there because you might have someone who's like, well, you haven't set this up yet. We have these many people who haven't registered their personal healthcare identifier number, and that's something we need to do statistics on. But saying like this person has a 5-character versus a 10-character is information that user probably shouldn't have.
Do we have a null preserving, value preserving hash or mask? Because like replace with default or replace with null, I would expect to like always give you a value or always give you null. So
I thought we said mask with default doesn't replace nulls, like left nulls alone, but maybe I got that wrong.
Yeah, it says in the description, like it's we redact for non-nullable columns. So like it should be like non-nullable values, but
for non-nullable columns, I don't think it's very clear about null behavior. But if we say this is null preserving, I think that's fine.
Yeah. One question though, what if like just going by the argument of the having length preserving mask, what if I am accessing this table via a view? That view depends on having X number of characters. Based on who I am, that gives me a redacted value or not gives me a redacted value. But for me, I always have to use that particular view. Maybe this is a bad way to do governance, but the thing is that they expect a certain length in that particular view definition. And in order to be accessible in both the scenarios where they can see the full value and they cannot see the full value, there is an implicit assumption on the length. How about a case like that?
Assumptions about the length are valid.
Okay.
I think we can construct a validation scenario for any of the outputs of these, and like, oh, that doesn't look real because it's always 9 characters. Like, yes, but I don't think that it is something we would design around people relying on.
Okay, if that's the case, I think, and then given that in case people are hell-bent in having this, we have a path with UDF, I think we can just drop it. I think, is that the consensus? Right then.
I mean, there's nothing stopping us from adding these things later. If a lot of people complain and they convince everyone, it's just, we can start with things we know make sense. And when people ask for things that maybe only make sense in certain cases, we can have those arguments made at that point in time.
Okay.
I am totally fine removing this entirely. That's valid. I think that enough people are going to look for this that it's probably better. I would, in my judgment, I would include it and just make it behave very strictly, right? Maybe we remove all the punctuation. Maybe we only use dashes or something, but like, I would probably leave it in because people are going to want it.
Yeah, I don't think that I have a strong opinion, honestly. Like, I think it's, practically speaking, it's unnecessary. Will people use it if we put it in? Absolutely. Because they want the pretty version. So I guess the question is, for the other ones that you've looked at, is there the equivalent? So we're saying like, hey, mask alphanumeric, but what we're really talking about is just like mask full, right? Everything gets masked. No questions, no translation, no omission. Do you see that anywhere in like Ranger or any of the other implementations? They have one that's just a mask.
They all have them. Like mask alpha num is from Ranger, and it's I think a very common mask to mask all the characters.
Well, that's different from mask alpha num is what we're describing here, I assume, with all the punctuation left in place, right? That's how Ranger behaves?
No, Ranger, I believe, just does X's and N's.
Oh, that's all. So it like either omits special characters or it turns them into X's?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're doing something different than what they're doing.
Yeah, all alphanumeric characters with X, all numeric characters with N.
Yes, something A.
And then some other crazy stuff that we won't do because ours is typed.
Yeah, I think the only question then is like, if people are trying to produce consistent policy across different systems, is ours a different behavior, really? Or do we have a consistent mapping for people who are trying to do that?
Oh, actually, we need to look further into this. So for consistency, I think that is the same as the argument I was making. But this says all alphabetic characters.
Yeah.
Which, like, I would not be comfortable with a spec that says all alphabetic characters. I would say, every single Unicode code point needs to be replaced with either an X or an N or left alone. And we need a very strict definition for all three of those categories.
That's why I'm asking.
That's why our version says these punctuation characters get left alone. 0 through 9 get replaced with N, and everything else, all other Unicode code points are replaced with X. So that's how we got to this point.
But the question is that inconsistent with how these other systems are doing it? I think it's actually better to be consistent than it is to be cute or clever.
I mean, if we're talking like our definition leaves, I don't know, traditional Chinese unredacted because we're not detecting which code points are alphabetic. Like, I think that's a big gap. So I feel strongly that if we do this, we need to say what happens to all of the code points that are not specified.
I agree with that.
So that's how we got here. It is, well, what is alphabetic? Unclear from that definition. Numeric is clear, but I think we say these things are left alone, which could be a set of 0 things. these things are masked to n, these things are masked to x. Or sorry, everything else is masked to x. And then it just is a debate of, if we are doing this because everyone else has it, then what do we leave clear? And I'm totally fine saying punctuation is a empty set, or everything is either masked to x or n, in which case I think we're doing similar enough.
Don't we run into the same problem with n? Like, so that those are,
but that's n is at least.
Boy. I was just looking up other definitions of numbers inside of Unicode, and there's other code points that theoretically are numbers, but are not 1 through 9.
Yeah, so that leads us back to the point of like, then, like,
I would be just very, very strict here, right? Like, we don't need 1/4 to be masked as n. Digits are fairly reliable, even across languages. I would say 0 through 9 get masked to n. Everything else gets masked to x. But I do think that because we have this definition from Ranger and other systems of alphabetic and numeric get masked to these characters and other things are left alone, we're going to have to either just cut this entirely or justify what gets left alone. Because the other thing is, it's going to be surprising behavior when you move from Ranger to this and your phone number no longer has dashes in it.
I'm okay with just saying these are the code points that we preserve, put a strict list on them, and then say everything else is X. I don't even know if doing numbers is special. I mean, we can just say like Arabic numerals that these code points are transformed to n, because there are so many others. So if we do a custom Unicode range, is that going to be stable for like punctuation?
So I think that it is stable, right? Like we're talking about 5 punctuation characters, right? Comma, dot, dash, open paren, close paren. I think that the purpose of those, the way I came up with that list is that if people are using mask alphanumeric from another system, those are what they're going to look for to see the structure of values that they use this on, right? So you're going to see a NNN dash NN dash NNNN for social security number. So we preserve that behavior where it's expected, but everything else, like, we actually have a useful mask, and I don't think that we leak too much information.
The only one that I think you missed there is the @ symbol, which is...
So that's debatable. And that's why I specifically said, like, hey, do we want this to be, like, I would be fine including or not including the @ symbol.
What about colon?
So this is why I just thought maybe we should just do a range, because we're also picking a bunch of symbols that are in all sorts of different parts of the Unicode range. Like there is a section that's mostly punctuation. So we just say this range is fine, as opposed to saying in this.
So, I mean, then we get into, I think, debating how secure is this thing, right? And space, for instance. I
would say we're already past the security thing when we're trying to do this cute stuff, right? Like we've already given up on the security of this. We're going to preserve length. We're going to preserve shape. We're going to preserve...
I think there is reasonable security in what is currently specified or currently proposed in the doc. I don't think that you're leaking that much information. Every character that we add to the set that passes through becomes more risk. And so I would just be very strict, meet the basic expectations that you're going to be able to eyeball a phone number or a social security number, and then move on.
Wait, so we're including dash?
Yes.
Interesting. I want to share one interesting thing that I was browsing, and I found that ranger mask function behavior is also very tricky. So this is the transformer that gets injected. If you see capital A to Z, and let me actually enlarge this a little
Just
bit.
alphabet characters.
Yes.
Just like the doc.
That is nasty.
Yes.
Just alphabets.
So you could use an entirely different character range and leak everything.
So
'Cause
why
that's-
would we? This is a behavior we shouldn't match at all. So this is where we can get to like why.
I mean, this-
why
this
do we
is-
do it?
This is why we need to strictly define, like Ryan said.
Okay.
We should not just use what they use because they're missing huge sections of Unicode character range here.
Precisely, I think.
I mean, basically any language and any, I guess Latin would, Latin languages, but like most languages would not be at all masked here.
You can see all those umlauts. Like they're gonna poke through.
So, going through the logic again, do we agree with this chain of reasoning? People use mask alphanumeric and have expectations about what is going to be left behind. We can, we don't have to, but it's probably better, in my view, to include it. We want to make that as secure as possible and not leave problems like Ranger does. Next, we want, and I think this is the real challenge. I would preserve some characters so that they get the same spirit of behavior, but with a more secure function. Those being very specific punctuation characters as passed through. And if so, I think that we get to basically, with that chain of reasoning, I think we get to what is proposed in Prashant's doc. We can say that we don't approve, and if the consensus is to take it out, I'm not going to argue. But I think what is here in this doc, potentially with the addition of the @ symbol, is secure and reasonable and something that people will use and want.
Okay, and then I think I generally agree with that. What is the function they use if they just want a full mask, no special characters? Is it mask to default? Is that the most secure?
I would vote on that. I mean, like if I was presenting these in our doc, mask to default would be first, and the mask alphanumeric would be like the last option. So you see that it's there, but people pick something else first, hopefully.
Okay.
I think
I'm good with that. As long as we have like a very strict option that can be used as the most secure, null preserving, which I think mask to default does, right? Because that is meaningful. Though we don't have one that doesn't preserve nulls, but I'm not sure that really matters because that's a separate thing. At that point, you're doing column redaction, right?
But, I mean, we could say that replace with mask to default always produces a value. We could do that, and then alpha num is. But in either case, like I actually have another argument for including this, which is how poorly done the Ranger version is. Because if we say, hey, like you guys are gonna have to, do this yourself through a UDF, we're gonna get this. And that sucks for security.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
I mean, this is just the Trino implementation, it looks like.
Yeah.
Or
So essentially,
they're
yes.
doing the equivalent with SQL. So I'm assuming that this is actually like a SQL function that they inject.
Exactly. But this is exactly what we will use even in the UDF. We will have that SQL string added to the optimizer or planner and then just expect the SQL to enforce it or execute it.
Okay.
Will it be a problem then for Trino if we wanted to do this? Because like, can they say replace any character?
Yeah, you can. I mean, I would invert the regex so that you would say preserve any special characters, replace any numeric characters within the range, and then everything else gets an X, right? So you can. I think you can do it safely. If you are translating it to a regex, you just wouldn't write it like this.
Yeah. And I think the whole point is to have, hardened implementations of the same thing in every engine, right? So it's not unreasonable to implement this, using code rather than SQL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you want it to be fast, you probably would not be doing what they're doing here with regexes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There is one interesting argument that if you write the code, sometimes like compilers don't optimize the UDFs that are language specific inline, so they just don't participate in the rewrites of SQL, so they're performance intensive. But definitely, I don't know if this versus writing a Python UDF which just does the right thing of doing the replaces would be better than that.
Well, I would assume most engines, if they have embedded functions, they could provide one, and it would be it would be optimized, right?
Yeah, because they're providing. Yeah, that's fact. Yeah, since they are providing that default, they would have a better way or visibility to optimize it in line. That's fair. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Think then is the consensus to keep it and add at here, or are we saying that it's still like?
I would add at for the same reason that you keep dash, right?
As long as we don't have to ever discuss it again, yes. I'm okay with doing it now.
Right, and I think that this does allow us to be very strict later on and say we included that. We talked about what can be passed through, and the whole point is we have to be more strict than alphanumeric, and like we chose a reasonable set. You get what you get. I think this will not be revisited.
I'm already looking at that. I'm like, are we going to get M dash required to be in here in like a few seconds? Because we got normal dash. It's okay. We're done. We'll pick this.
Detect AI generated text.
AI just starts using M dashes instead of normal dashes in its social security numbers, and now they look different. So I don't know.
It'll be an interesting argument. Cool. Cool. I think then we'll just keep it. I'll revisit this text. I think what we want is that clearly say that this is the way of getting your mask in the absolute clear way. I think just reorganizing which comes first, which comes later, and having strict about the punctuation and put a pin on it for now. Fair. I'll say no objection, so yes as an answer. Okay. Cool. I think then this brings us to the elephant in the room, that's SHA-256 table and SHA-256 random salt. So before I go into the individual one thing I just wanted to discuss or recap also is that we talked about how to infer one type from the another when you use SHA-256 and which types it is applicable to. I have a section for that. So just to recap, SHA-256 global or stable is like, you apply the SHA-256 algorithm against the given column value. You have one data type as an input, and because of a rule, you get the same data type as an output. If it's not string, then we are in the middle. So how do you, which data types it is applicable for? is one thing we discussed, and how to infer one data type given feeding it into the short-56 and getting the same data type back. So far our recommendation is string, int, and long. We noted also previously that things like fixed and binary can also fit into this, but I don't know if there are real masks that people would want to do that. So in case anyone has strong arguments or strong use case in which they want to mask short-56 with that binary or fixed length, please feel free to add it or bring it up. Meanwhile, I want to go into just recapping the data types inferences, like how do you have an int, and how do you get back an int using the short-56 as a function. So int to int is like you first feed into the bytes, you use short-56 bytes, and as Ryan suggested in the doc, we want to be very precise on the Indianness and how we are taking that value and how we are interpreting it back. So this is just a recommendation, and let me know if you have strong opinion on why it should be done differently. I just took like what made more sense. So we have 4 bytes binary, little Indian, int. So and then once we feed it to the hash function, we get back the bytes, and we read first 4 bytes. We read it as int and a little Indian form. Similarly for long, and similarly for string. String we have UTF-8 bytes, and we get back a 64 character strings. So this is the 3 data types we have in mind. And this was the recap of the short-56 as a general hash function. Now this brings us to the point that we wanted to discuss more about. There are 2 flavors of this. First flavor is short-56 256 global, where everyone uses this mask and have a consistent value out of it because short-256 is a standard algorithm. And the second one is like short-56 query local, essentially within the execution of the query. That is consistent, so that if you have joins within the query, that could be done correctly, but across queries, that output will be different. The way to go about and generating the short-56 query local is like query engine generates a salt, and then we concatenate that to the bytes, then feed it to 256, and the same inference logic that we have for string and long inference applies. Now the question that was pending, that who returns the salt, I think I believe it would be easier if engines do that, because anyways it's the local to the query execution. So that's the overall thing. So query local proposal is to like have an engine generate a salt and then apply it and then enforce it. Yeah. Sun, yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Prashant, I appreciate you like responding to my comments there. My mind jumped around a little bit as we were discussing this specific feature, because when I surveyed the prospective users within our engineering teams, they actually did mention the query local hash is something that is very important to them. And I think the way we've worded this implies that we expect the behavior to be query local, the hashing to be kind of preserved within a query. And I think it'll be helpful to clarify whether the same salt is expected to be used across many different fields within the query as well. Because the natural thing that the teams want to do is actually to be able to join across different fields within the same query. And they use their kind of, they use their engineering or a knowledge of the fields to decide what SQL query they want to run across which tables and which fields, without having to manage the semantic outside.
So can I ask a quick question there? You're saying like within a table, multiple columns would be hashed using the same salt, or just that? And I guess that would take care of like self joins and things like that.
Yeah, self joins as well as like cross table joins, which is run within a single SQL query, right? If the query runner has the knowledge that 2 fields are expected to have the same value, they can actually execute that SQL query and rely on this function to achieve joinability. But and that's exactly where my comments came from. But I think it's important for us to discuss whether that should be a responsibility for read restrictions within Iceberg REST catalog spec to define the joinability of the fields that are masked, or whether we should only go far as defining who should be responsible for producing that salt.
Well, I think there's a question there in terms of like, if it's within the context of a single query, you can always pretty much assume it's the same engine. So they could produce a salt within the engine that only lives for that query, and it doesn't include the REST catalog in any way. The question then, though, is like, do we consider if you are rewriting that and you're then expecting that to be stable across engines, now you're drifting into the stable territory. So I think that there's a question of like, why would the catalog need to provide that salt or anything? Because the local nature of the random means that it is engine bound, and it should not be preserved if you write it out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Prashant. Let me just respond to Daniel to clarify my point first, if that's all right with you. So I definitely agree with that. What I'm highlighting is that, you know, even when we are defining that distinction between the REST catalog sending the salt or the engine producing the salt, we have an opportunity to define whether the behavior, expected behavior as a result of the read restriction is that the salt be reused within the scope of a query or not. Right, that we're telling the engine that you're supposed to produce a salt, but do we actually care about dictating the behavior of how that salt is used within the scope of a query or across queries?
I believe that we do, because of the issue that you're talking about. Like the explicit requirement here in the doc is it is joinable within the context of a query. And that should, I mean, as long as you guarantee it's joinable, I don't think we care. But like the easy way to do that is you generate one salt, you use it in the hash function, no matter where you call it for the same query.
Actually, I think what you're asking about, though, is controllable by the catalog, but it's not in the mechanism you're saying. If the catalog returns stable, that will be reusable. If it returns local random, then it will not be reusable. And it can do that based on who is actually accessing the table or how the catalog wants the behavior to be. So I don't think it needs to be salt-based, right?
So I think, though, it's slightly different, Dan. It's saying, like, if I have two tables with a mask, do I generate a salt for table A and a salt for table B, or do I generate a salt for the query and use that salt in both hash situations? If you want joinability, you have to use a consistent salt in any place that you are going to join those two things together. And you may also have an expectation that if I just select, you know, star from table A with the salt and union it with select star from table B with the salt, that I get consistent results. So I think we do need to actually specify that there is one and only one salt per query, and that's used in all of the query local hash.
So do we have scenarios where that is not true, where, like, because I think that there are some engines that define joinability as part of their policy definition, right? So because it basically just comes down to, can the catalog define what can be joined, or are we just saying that, like, if this policy is applied, anything that's under that the random salt can be joined within the context of a query?
I think what we say is this hash function behaves in the following way. You generate a salt per query and use that salt for all hashing within that query when it's a query local hash. And that gives us this very predictable behavior. Whether I, you know, have completely separate columns on table A and table B, I use the same salt. If I'm later going to join them, and even if the engine doesn't know about that join, you use the same salt. Like, I think that is just very well defined, that the engine generates a salt value and uses it on every invocation of this function throughout the query.
Okay, so that means that we're saying that anything that is using this policy within the context of a query that you can read from, you can join.
Yeah. You bring a very interesting point, Dan. I mean, Snowflake has something called join policies, which essentially says that you can't join this table with any other join. But the way it's enforced is entirely a query planner rewrite way in which we detect that, okay, you are joining this table against the table you're not allowed to join, rather than manipulating the local salt in which we expect the join returning the wrong output. So maybe that would be a way to enforce that, okay, you can't join this table with anyone else, and that could be your join policy. But I think just wanted, I think we all have already discussed that we want to do this, but I just wanted to say that I'm +1 on having engine generate salt only once in the context of a query execution and reuse it throughout, and even throughout the subqueries as well. So it's for engine one user prompt of a query. Maybe if you want to clarify a little bit more on what defines a query, we can define that as well.
I agree with that too. I just wanted to point out what we're losing, which is that ability to kind of like control what can be joined. I also think that that is getting into a level of complexity that is unlikely to be used or implemented, and it's unclear from the admin how they would be able to set up that policy and enforce it practically. So I think we're actually causing problems by doing that, because it'll most likely end up in the scenario where it's like you can't join things because it's providing random hashes, you know, across the different queries. And what the intent of this is, and if we spell that out, is that this is a query local hashing to allow for joins within the context of a single query, and it's not preserved if you persist it or something else, right? So I'm fine with that. I just want to clarify, you know, because I did know about some of these other join policies and things like that, and like we're basically saying, hey, you can't do this through this path. I think that's pretty atypical anyway. So
totally agree.
And it would probably still be enforceable in Snowflake if you set that policy up in Snowflake, right? Like it would still adhere to that and ignore the hashing thing. You wouldn't even get to that point.
Okay.
Sung, you had your hand up.
No, I basically agree with what you said. I think as long as we're defining what a query means within the spec or within related docs, we can enforce that policy if we want to control that behavior across all of our engines. The alternative would be for us to just decide that joinability is something that each of the engines will need to decide for themselves, or the ecosystem integrator to decide for themselves, right? And for the REST catalog to just dictate whether the salt is produced by the engine or not.
I think we kind of are delegating that to the engine, because like if you think about Spark, if you're working within data frames, like what do you call the context of the query? Is it your Spark session? Is it the individual execution? We'll probably have to get into those details just because some of those boundaries are not entirely clear, whereas other engines may have a much more clear transactional boundary that you can say, hey, if you're operating within a transaction, that's the point at which we define the salt, and anything executing within that will reuse the same salt. So it always is going to end up being, to some extent, an engine responsibility to do the right thing for their users and the use case within the engine.
We might want to specify it more clearly then that it is a value generated by the engine and injected at analysis time or something like that. But we can figure out those details. I think the important thing is we're saying joins must work across tables.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. This brings an interesting question, though. I think I pointed in the chat, is like what happens to Iceberg, which is a non-SQL client, and we might have to discuss this a little bit more. I don't know how do we define the semantics there, because there is parts where it can be pushed down. So I'll collect my thoughts on that. I know we are already out of time, so I
think that is like my quick take on that is that's Iceberg's problem.
Okay.
Yep. Just like the Spark problem, it's like, yeah, it could be process scoped, right? Python has different life cycle than query engines. It could be Spark session scoped for Iceberg or, you know, data frame operations. We just need to sit down and go through the use cases and see which one makes sense, and then implementation defines that. It's not a spec thing.
Yeah, but also like it's perfectly reasonable to say within the scope of Iceberg, a query is a scan, and like in that case, yeah, you would need to have some way of specifying multiple things that you're scanning at the same time as a query but that's a implementation and sort of API detail of those engines.
That's fair. Maybe in the next thing we can discuss a little bit more about it before we put up into the local hash generation. I know we are already out of time, so not hold you all more. Cool. It's really nice that we were able to close on a lot of masking functions. I'll try to take the feedback and update the doc, and just let's continue the discussion on the query local on how to generate the sort. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Really nice you all joined. Thank you for your feedbacks. Looking forward to the next thing. Bye.
Thanks.